Kia ora koutou. Is that right like that? Thank you for coming today. It's really nice to see you here and very interesting to see who's in the room. A good event. So the question of is work working? I guess for some people it is. Those that get the benefits of work and those that have stable employment and are able to earn decent living. But the reality is that for the majority of workers now, that is becoming a really big question. Is it working? Has the deal around work changed without us noticing? And really for me, why is nobody talking about it? So the reality is that the New Zealand workforce is being divided into two. It's being divided into those that have got secure employment, are able to rely on those jobs and are getting wages that meet their daily living costs. And then a whole group, over 300,000 workers in this country are earning on or near the minimum wage, or are on a or even more are on a benefit, another whole 160,000 on a benefit. For that group, you could say that work is not working either to provide them the security that good and decent employment should be providing them, or to meet their daily needs. And we've got to ask yourself, when did the deal change? When did the deal become that you could work all day, all week, and still spend Saturday at the food bank trying to make ends meet? What is that deal? And what are we going to do about it to make sure that there's a discussion around what's happening at work? And there's very, very little talk in this country about what is going on at work. It's interesting, since the big disputes on the Ports of Auckland and the AFCO workers, there is a discussion is beginning to start. And more we are being asked, the union movement, seen as the voice about work, to have that discussion. And as we get deeper into it, it's getting more and more controversial, because as we start pointing out what's going on at work, there's the attack to try and shut that down and to suggest that we aren't realistic is growing. So people will have seen very recently the issue around the drug testing of beneficiaries. The government intends to cut the benefit for 13 weeks for any beneficiary that tests positive for drug use, not drug impairment, for drug use when they're applying for a job. Now that must be a breach of the Bill of Rights of this country, a harsh punishment, an unreasonable punishment for that sort of activity. The only thing the Council of Trade Unions was speaking out about was that, the fact that the government was going to cut the benefits of people in this country for 13 weeks if they tested positive for even legacy drug use. And we know about some drugs, they stay in your blood system for a long time. And that the Ministry of Health was saying it was going to cost $14 million, fill up rehabilitation clinics for people who don't need rehabilitation treatment. Because if you need rehabilitation, you won't lose your benefit, so everybody's going to suddenly need it. And we were saying it was wrong, and it was policy that money that should have been directed into job creation and decent jobs and lifting wages of low-paid workers. But the outcry, the rage and outcry from ordinary working people who rely on the social security system of this country to provide a social protection floor was incredible. And I think that is a danger of having this conversation about work. Recently, Burger King workers, you'll know, are seeking a decent pay increase and having a go at that company. Have a look at the TV1 website when they ran a story about those workers and the comments from hundreds and hundreds of workers denigrating those workers' claims and suggesting they should be grateful to have a job, lucky to have a job, unskilled labour, flipping burgers. Who the flip do they think they are? Now, the narrative being driven up about work these days, the dominant narrative in every discussion, is that work, people who provide work, employers, now businesses, given a personality called the employer, businesses are benefactors, they're running a charity, doing a charitable deed by offering jobs to people, and that story makes workers beneficiaries. That in fact the relationship is charitable. It's not an exchange of labour for wages, an honest, good exchange that should have mutual benefits, but it is a beneficial relationship where charity flows from one to the other. And within a charitable relationship, workers shouldn't put their hand up, shouldn't seek a decent wage, shouldn't raise health and safety issues, should be grateful. Should be grateful for what they've got, should shut up and put up. And if you don't believe me, you can just have a look at some very, very high profile incidences of this being portrayed in this country. And the most obvious one was at the Pike River mine. That mine exploded 1 year after it opened. Not 20 years of digging out coal or this, that and the other, 1 year. And immediately it exploded. The Prime Minister and all his cabinet mates flew down and stood beside that CEO like he was some sort of hero. Those families, for the first 2 weeks after that explosion, were totally silenced by the hysteria created around how brave Peter Whittle was. When he told them, I think those miners are having a nice old conversation in that clean air room down there and I think we'll get them out. When he knew there was no clean air going into that mine, there was no clean air room, they had never built it. When he told them, when he failed to tell them that there was a fire in that mine, raging away, eating up any oxygen that might have survived from the blast. The Prime Minister, the families, if they wanted any information about those first 2 weeks, had to sit in the room with Peter Whittle, the Prime Minister, Jerry Brownlee, the police and everybody, giving it to them. And we saw what happened when Australian journalists asked hard questions. They were driven out of the country, called insensitive. I was called churlish for raising the issue. Now what happened with Pike River Mine was it was depicted as a beneficiary, a benefactor to the people of the West Coast, providing great jobs, jobs where they were needed, those brave men marching down their mine to get the coal out. How could you dare think that was anything but a charitable relationship? And we now know the truth of what happened in that mine. There was no charity going on there. Those men weren't being fed by Pike River, they were working for Pike River. One of them, a 17-year-old kid, on his first day at work, a contractor to a contractor, was killed in that mine. And what happened? Those shareholders, the shareholders of Pike River, have walked away scot-free. And I'll tell you what, Peter Whittle was nominated for New Zealander of the Year 3 weeks after the Pike River mine exploded. That's one narrative. In this city, the dispute around the Hobbit was where this narrative also played out. Those performers simply seeking to negotiate collective terms and conditions with one of the most profitable corporations operating in this country, Warner's, they were hammered down. Their organisation disintegrated as the fury of public hysteria was built up in the narrative that they should be grateful, that they shouldn't bite the hand that feeds them, that the great Warners was bringing 2,000 jobs to this country. They were hammered down, personally attacked. It was an attempt to try and destroy them, those actors that bravely spoke out, and in the end, the performers didn't have their international rights to collective bargaining recognised. Those are the big stories, but you can see it all the time, and it's really important that we look out for it. The other day, an employer in the Waikato was fined $25,000 for failing to guard a machine. An accident where a worker just tipped the top of his finger on an unguarded machine. He was fined $25,000 and it was $25,000 for him to guard the machine. The Waikato newspaper ran the headline, "Small cut costs employer $50,000. Yep. So that man could have cut his arm off, as a man has recently done at South Pacific Meats in Invercargill on a faulty machine. 13 amputations on the same machine, no public outrage at South Pacific Meats. But that man could have cut his arm off, he cut his finger off. And the Waikato Times is painting it as some sort of PC madness gone wrong. So the story is very strong, it's compelling, it permeates our society, and our job is to fight back and say, this is the deal, this is the deal. Workers are honestly selling their labour for wages as part of an economy that should benefit everybody. Everybody that benefits from their labour should enter into a full, proper employment relationship with them. None of this contracting business where you reap the benefits and take no responsibility. None of the contracting business where a kid like Joseph Dunbar is 2 steps removed from Pike River, unable, even if he knew that mine was dangerous, to raise concern. Pike River was benefiting from his labour that day. They were receiving his labour, but they had no obligations to him. None of that. This is the deal. We work hard. We fulfil our obligations, which are clearly set out in the law, to be honest and loyal and turn up and work hard and not steal things and all of those things. And employers and business must also fulfil their obligations. A living wage, decent hours, reasonable expectations, dignity, and in the end also an employment model that provides good jobs for everybody that needs them. So is work the whole deal? Is it meeting the needs of the community? No, it's not actually, because while we've got people being exploited in the way that is increasing in this economy, and you would have seen inequality grow in the last year in terms of wages, then the reality is work is not paying, and unless we fight back and unless we have a plan, then it'll continue, because this is the story, the dominant story that's being pushed out, and soon everybody will believe it, and our lives will get fewer and fewer. Thank you.